Alright, I'm not gonna lie, today I was supposed to drop a different video, however it is kind of big, so I decided to just drop this a little bit because I wanted to talk about playstyles and how important they are in Type. The video will be divided into 3 sections, one going over aggressive playstyles and their strengths and weaknesses, another going over passives and their strengths and weaknesses, and then the final one just comparing them both and seeing which one is better. Before we start again, make sure to like and subscribe and let's get right into it. Alright, for the very first section, we're gonna go over the aggressive playstyle. So this is like the player that is straight up just W keying or applying constant pressure onto the enemy. I feel like this is especially effective against less experienced players and in lower elos, just because most people aren't that good at dealing with that much pressure. So a lot of the time they just panic and mess up. A lot of the time people can also mess up, and this can lead to you getting a free combo off, especially in the lower elos, because straight up people don't have their HP kits mid-max, so you are able to apply a lot of pressure and just get a lot of free damage. It does kind of depend on your build if you should be running an aggressive playstyle at lower elos. I'm going to get more into that later. It's still viable in higher elos, of course, but the higher you go, the more busted the builds get, and usually more busted builds are used with passive playstyles. Best builds I would recommend going with an aggressive playstyle would probably be speed or kendo. Kendo not as much, just because you don't have as much to engage with, in my opinion. Like in this clip, you guys can see that I am constantly W keying, and that's just because my my partial resurrection allows me to W key. If I didn't have this, I would not have the luxury of being able to press this guy as hard. On a normal kendo build, you should generally have something that has a gap closer, and if you do, you should be able to W key on kendo. Speed by itself is able to W key really well. I feel like other skill trees like Kido and Hakuda are not able to W key as well, and like playing aggressive just does not work on them. I'm gonna get more into that later. Now I want to talk about the pros and cons of an aggressive playstyle. The cons are it's a lot easier to get punished by a passive playstyle, especially one on a skill tree that's designed for passive plays like Kido. But even with skill trees like kendo or speed, if you overextend or get too aggressive, you can easily give your enemy a free combo. This is honestly a mistake I make quite a bit, so I'd especially make sure to be mindful when you're dealing with an experienced player. Aside from that, another big flaw in aggressive playstyles is that they are heavily reliant on good movement skills. So like for example, speed has Spectre step, which is an incredibly useful move for applying pressure and starting combos. So playing aggressive with speed is relatively easy, whereas something like Quincy Kido, it doesn't really have any moves that allow you to rush in and start combos. Like all of the moves are going to be far away, so generally speaking, Quincy Kido players are pretty much just forced to play super passive in that sense, right? Like you're not really supposed to be engaging with that. So when it comes to the playstyles pros, it does have quite a few benefits. First off, the main thing I want to get out of the way is the fact that when you're dealing with inexperienced players, like I said before, it's really easy to just get them overwhelmed and easily beat them. When you're playing against more aggressive players, you can still do the same thing. However, they are going to be a bit easier or a bit more difficult to crack, just because, you know, they're going to be more used to playing the game. But even at a certain point, like I've queued people that are like 1 million elo, I just kept rushing at them. Eventually they mess up and I get a free combo off and I take like half their HP off. Like the matches also do end a lot faster, so if you're trying to rank up faster, I would say an aggressive playstyle is definitely worth it. Generally speaking though, I feel like playing super aggressive and playing super reckless need to be differentiated, because a lot of the time I feel like people do mix these two things up, where they're just going to be running at the enemy mindlessly, which I'm not gonna lie is something that I do as well. But excuse for continuously doing this is the fact that no ego, like usually I don't play this game as much, so my rank, like my actual rank, is not my skill level rank. Like if I wanted to, I could grind up to like 1 million elo, but I don't, because I don't really like Type right now, I'm not gonna lie. So I'm just playing in lower lobby so I can just spam all my moves. If you guys are watching me and trying to copy what I do, I'm not gonna lie, I'm playing like a total bot right now. But if you guys actually want to sweat, I would play smart. My main strategy, or honestly what I would recommend, is to just watch my old speed videos. Back then I used to actually be a super sweat, but like the main thing I would honestly recommend for an aggressive playstyle is to just spam your gap closer into a combo. So for example, on speed, what I like to do is Spectre step, feint, fast fang into like waterfall dance. Most people don't expect it. Like all of the times, I'm not gonna lie, you may end up just getting them completely avoiding the combo. However, when you do land it, it does like half their HP. Endo players, your main gap closer is going to be Flower Passage. I would always recommend feinting it. You can feint it into like Sonata Flow, or you can feint it into an M1 into Rising Swallow. I don't think Flower Passage into Rising Swallow is actually true anymore. If you want a true combo, go for Sonata Flow. If you want more damage, go for Rising, but they can't block it. Whereas before we conclude this section, the flaws are it's easy to get punished, and it's easy to start playing reckless instead of aggressive and get yourself punished. Well, the pros are you're able to apply more pressure and thus start more combos and end your matches faster. Now we're on to the passive playstyle section, and you're going to instantly notice that the main skill trees that I mentioned for the passive playstyles are the ones that people mainly complain about, being Hakata and Kido. But before, to quickly summarize what a passive playstyle is, it's essentially when your opponent is S-keying or just running away and playing cooldowns. In other games you could describe this better, but with Typesoul's combat system, I feel like this is the best way to describe most passive playstyles. As I said before, the main builds that utilize this playstyle are Kido players, Hakata players, and even medic players, though you can obviously use this on Kendo and speed as well. I would recommend this on Kendo honestly, but I'm not gonna lie, generally Kido is designed to be specifically energy based attacks, and both Quincy and Soul Reaper Kido have little to no close range moves. They are kind of just forced to S key. While Aronker Kido does have some close range moves, they are best used when playing passive, so like Sarah Scourge, it's really easy to catch somebody off guard, especially against somebody who's playing super reckless. Generally speaking, in my opinion, I feel like it's really easy to miss the move as well if you're just running in and using it, just because it does have somewhat of a long windup. So if you're fighting somebody who's S keying, generally I feel like Aronker Kido won't be as effective. Like, you need to be the one who's S-keying most of the time anyways, right? Let's move on to the pros and cons. Obviously, the cons are going to be your fights last a lot longer in comparison to the aggressive playstyle, just because you're going to be chipping away at your opponent's HP. Though I will say, I'm not going to lie, for certain skill trees, for example, Aronker Kido and sometimes Hakata, if you're playing against somebody who doesn't know what you're doing, it is going to end a lot faster in comparison to other passive builds, just because Aronker Kido and Hakata do a fuck ton of damage. However, generally speaking, an aggressive playstyle user that's good should end their matches before you. From that, I'm not gonna lie, there's no real downside to the passive playstyle. Maybe if you're playing in like an enclosed environment, you might end up getting cooked, but Typesoul generally does have pretty open maps. Like, the rank map is massive. Usually in public servers you're gonna be fine, and maybe in clan wars when you're doing like King of the World you might get cooked, but even then that map is giant. Aside from that, let's move on to the pros of this playstyle. First off, I'm not gonna lie, most of the time you're not gonna be losing. I'm gonna mainly talk about this in the next section where I compare them, but generally speaking, passive playstyle just does not require as much skill, because every single person who uses it is just gonna be running away and spamming all of their moves over and over, and then they're gonna act like they're okay. Anyways, I'm not being biased at all, but I'm just saying one playstyle requires a lot less brain cells and a lot less effort than the other one. However, I will say there is generally a higher skill ceiling when it comes to passive or aggressive playstyle skills rather than passive. Like, with some stuff like Quincy Kido, once you figure it out and once you're fighting somebody who knows what they're doing, especially with like a Ronkar, you're gonna get cooked. Like, for a Ronkar especially, like at high levels, you're gonna need to start mixing up and actually sweating your ass off in order to even get one hit off of any of your moves. Whereas when it comes to the aggressive playstyle based builds, you're going to be able to get your combos off a lot more consistently. See, most people don't really know like this game like that, so generally speaking, passive playstyle is just going to help the average player way more. I'm not even gonna lie, bro, that shit is actually just press 1 2 3 4 5 6 and win. Anyway, so let's move on to the comparison part. Now we're on to the comparison section. Before we start, I'm not gonna lie, I might be slightly biased, just a little bit. So if any passive players want to argue their defense in the comments, feel free to. You know, this is an open-minded space, you feel me? So let's get right into it. I feel like the main thing I want to talk about is the skill difference between an average passive player in comparison to aggressive. Generally speaking, I feel like when you're playing aggressive more, especially as a new player, you're gonna get better a lot faster than somebody who's just running away and spamming Kido moves. At the same time, if you plan on only playing Kido, it won't really affect you, because I'm not gonna lie, I've seen some actual trash cans, I won't name anybody, hit like 1 mil plus elo. I've seen somebody hit like fucking top 5 on Kido when they're literally trash. Alright, you know, I'm not gonna get into that, but basically, like, you are able to get really high, but if you ever want to play the game normally and have actual fun, you'll notice that your skill will not actually transfer, and I feel like that is kind of an issue, especially when you do want to play at the higher levels. Because I'm not gonna lie, I did call somebody trash for playing Kido at a high level, but you do still need some sort of brain cells to compete against people that are actually good at the game and they know what they're doing. So I feel like for that reason, it's better as a newbie to start out playing with the aggressive base builds instead of just playing the range stuff that most people do. However, if you want free elo, then I would just get on the passive stuff. I'm not gonna lie, like, that's the main thing I feel like, because passive playstyles are just newbie stompers. Once you figure out what you're doing against them, they're a lot easier to deal with, especially like Hakata specifically, because I know a lot of people do struggle when they're fighting Hakata, and that's like a big thing, and it was a big thing in the game when it first dropped because nobody liked fighting Hakata. That's like the best example, because at higher levels, I'm not gonna lie, I barely see any Hakata players unless they're on a build like this guy's where you just spam Zangetsu and a bunch of true combos that are unstoppable, unblockable, unparryable. The games, I feel like having a defensive playstyle can be seen as having like a more of a strategic mindset towards it. I feel like in Typesoul that does not really apply just because of how the game's combat is. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think the fucking Quincy Kido user is sitting in his head strategizing what his next next move is when he's literally just pressing 1 2 3 4 and killing me. Like straight up, I'm not gonna lie. Like originally I wanted to talk about stuff like that, but like after fighting some of these guys, I'm not gonna lie, like most passive players or more passive base builds specifically either just spam true combos or they just run away and spam all their moves. But at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, aggressive builds, if you want to actually win and make your aggressive playstyle like be rewarding, you also need true combos. Like that's the way you actually win at this game. You just spam a bunch of true combos over and over till you win, and the person with the better true combos or the person who lands the most is the one that ultimately wins the fight. So it just depends on how you want to get your damage off. Do you want to get it off by rushing in and getting your true combo off by yourself through pressure, or do you want to just chip away at your opponent's HP from afar? It just depends on what type of player you are and how much time you also want to dedicate to the game as well. Basically, to summarize everything that I just said, if you want to like sweat this game, or if you think you're gonna play this for a good period of time, or if you want to have fun playing the game, then I would recommend hopping on Kendo, Speed, or even like Hakata. Like those are the best options. If you just want to win and you just want to like get a lot of elo, or if you want to play with your friends who sweat this game or whatever, then you could hop on Speed and adopt the passive playstyle. It's a lot easier to learn and it requires less skill. Anyways, yeah, that's it for the video. I have to go.